Assalamu alaikum, I'm Aisha.
Assalamu alaikum, and I'm Amanda. And this is Converts Unplugged. No fluff, no holding back, just honest conversation.
Brought to you by New Beginnings, a platform that aims to support new Muslims on their journey through Islam from the Shahada and beyond.
Assalamu alaikum, Aisha. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, Amanda, how are you?
I'm not too bad, alhamdulillah. I wanted to say thank you to all our listeners for the great feedback we had for our last episode, which of course was with Brother Yahya Burt discussing his journey to Islam and his book recommendations for new Muslims.
Absolutely. I can absolutely vouch for that. I had such a fun time, an amazing time listening to him. And also we've had some great feedback, actually. We've had a couple of people say that he was a fantastic guest and that the topic we chose was actually really, really good. So I'm really pleased with that. And thank you to everyone who's responded. Thank you to everyone who even tunes in, you know?
Yeah. So I think what we're going to do now, let's just jump straight in and introduce our guests for this month. We have with us today two local Cardiff new Muslims, well, not new Muslims, mashallah, seasoned converts, tabarakallah, Hanan and John.
Hanan and John, thank you so much for joining us both. Both Amanda and I are super excited for you both to be here. So who exactly are Hanan and John? Please feel free to tell us a little bit more about yourselves.
Hey, assalamu alaikum. My name is John Smith, honestly. I took my Shahada in 2002.
Mashallah.
After moving to Pontypridd from Hereford, where I grew up. And since then, I've been continuing my journey in Islam for nearly coming on 20 years now, isn't it? 18, 19 years.
Yeah.
And learning all the time as I go. I've had a variety of jobs, everything from being an archaeologist to
that's amazing.
Work in the chicken factory, all kinds of things, because I've got a broad field of interest. I'm interested in things like languages and linguistics. I love reading. I love history. And these things have all been served by Islam in one way or another as well, which is, I find, it amazes me as I've carried on my journey in Islam, how much it actually gives you. No matter what you're interested in, you will always find something in Islam that can feed an interest of yours. So, alhamdulillah.
How about you, Hanan? Let's hear a little bit more about you.
I took my Shahada 25 years ago. It'll be 26 in January. I converted after that sort of journey and struggle of me trying to find some meaning. I was, asking, thinking a lot and asking questions of myself, like, what is the point of life? I was, I studied art. And I like to read a lot, and I just I wasn't finding the answers. And I'd sort of done some yoga, went to some kind of new age kind of stuff, and found that a little bit empty. I had a friend who was a Buddhist, and he became Buddhist, and so he asked me to a Buddhist meeting, and I didn't find that really resonated with me. But so I had lots of Muslim friends, and I think Yahya Burt said, I listened to his whole journey with
Tamimi.
And so John and I have actually done that along with Amanda a while ago. But we have done that with him in sort of more in depth. And also we did it online on a Wales Online interview this time last year, actually.
Yes.
Just before Christmas, and it came out then in January.
Yes.
So your story is out there. Yeah.
Hanan, I know that you are a budding artist, and I know that you make these lovely little acorn people, which I think are so charming and lovely, as I follow you on Instagram. So could you tell us and the listeners more about that?
Well, I loved drawing and art, and I think that's all I did when I was very young. And then I went to art college, and so then I did a degree. But then, when I became Muslim, I didn't basically have time to do a lot of art when I had children, and then just recently I've been out. But the children are older now, and so my children said to me as well, "You've got to get Instagram, Mum. You've got to put your stuff up there." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know how to do it." And so they helped me with with doing it, and now with my Etsy, I've got an Etsy shop, and so sometimes I do Islamic type of things. I do and I'll do commissions for people. I'm bunting So I do a lot of, and so because when we first converted, all of us guys, there wasn't much out there. So if you wanted to decorate your house for Eid, I used to go around to people's houses and they had Christmas decorations up. And that for me just was weird. And now you can get a plethora of stuff. But I just made my own. And then over time, I don't know when I suddenly got into the bunting thing. I just got really obsessed with it. Bunting for every occasion. But mostly the Eid, the handmade. I like to make handmade things, which is why I coined the name Hanan made.
I like the idea of bunting. I mean, bunting is such a quintessentially British thing, and yet you're doing it for Islamic festivals, for Eid, for when I remember you did some decorations when a friend of ours got married, and we had a little party for her ahead of time. Mashallah. Yes. So, these are things. It's like this lovely merging of British, something that is very, very, very British with Islamic practices and so on. And this is, I was having this discussion earlier with somebody about, the loss of culture that a lot of converts experience when we become Muslim. We're sort of expected to, to purge ourselves of every cultural influence we may have. And the fact is, we don't need to do that. And this is like, it might seem very small and insignificant, but it's a very good example.
Yeah.
As you said, the culture is just, Islam has always taken the good of any culture and dismissed with the bad of it. And this is something which, because we're lacking a British Islam. The Ottomans were very different to the Moroccans, but they were still Muslim. The Turks were very different, the Turkic peoples, the Azerbaijanians, the other ones where Islam was, even in places like the Somalis, are very different culturally to other people, but they all have Islam. The Islam is the same.
Yeah.
But do you think that that's just really a matter of time? I mean, all of these countries that we consider to be Muslim countries, quote unquote, have had predominantly Muslim populations for centuries. Whereas we in the UK, we're still only just barely scraping 5% of the total population. And most of those are not, quote, indigenous Britons, end quote. So I think it's, it's probably just a matter of time before we find that there is, I have to be honest, I don't like the term British Islam, because I think Islam is Islam, but a British expression of Islam.
Very good.
I think that there is a subtle but important nuance difference there.
True.
I think that it's just a matter of time and that it will grow organically. I have to say, what I'm wary about is it being imposed, like what we're seeing happening in France right now. The idea that there must be this secular French Islam. Now, we're still talking about your personal journeys. What do you think was the biggest struggle that you have faced? I'm just going to ask you for one each, but the biggest struggle that you have faced since becoming Muslim. Because, as our tagline says, just honest conversation. We want to talk about, the lovely things about Islam, but also the things that we face, the struggles that we face when we come to Islam. Hanan, how about you?
Oh,
yeah.
How long have we got?
Just one thing, Hanan.
Yeah, I mean, alhamdulillah, my family were great. So, for some people, that's really their struggle, isn't it? They can. I've met sisters that have, had their family not talking to them, didn't want to see their grandchildren, that kind of thing. It's just so awful. Alhamdulillah, I never had that. Alhamdulillah. I suppose. I mean, initially, without getting too personal, because I don't feel like this is the place, but I think initially I did feel a real, I'd fallen into a sort of a chasm between, my friends who I had before Islam, and then the people that I met then who were Muslim. So even the non-Muslims even the Muslims that I knew before Islam, when I became Muslim, it was like I'd stepped over this line now.
Oh, interesting.
And so it was like in my, obviously I wasn't, the perfect, still, of course, we're not perfect Muslims, but you're trying to do everything right. Yeah. You're struggling, you're reading a lot, and you're really quite, so I was quite zealous as well, which is not necessarily a good thing. But I think then I was almost like, I wasn't like those Muslims anymore. Because obviously I met those Muslims in clubs and things like that. And then the other Muslims that I was meeting in the mosque were, predominantly I met a lot of people from Saudi Arabia at the time. So you can imagine the difference now. There's me in the middle. you know.
Can I ask a question? Sorry to interject. Were you in Cardiff at the time?
Yes, yeah. I was born in Cornwall, but I've lived in Cardiff since 1990. So so I was here, and you know, I knew lots of Muslims. I knew Muslims from different places, like you were saying just then about the madhabs. I knew a Shafi, a Maliki, and a Hanafi. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know what those things were. But now looking back, I wondered why, when I asked them to help me pray, each of them was different. So I had a book from the Yemeni imam that I took my shahada with, and then and so I was so confused that for a long time I actually just didn't know what to do, and I really did feel lost. And I think that's what I mean about this chasm, is that I felt like I was too Muslim for those people, and I wasn't Muslim enough for those people. I mean, nobody told me that, but that's how I felt. And I think that's why now, and why we have tried to set up, you know, things, you know, like to support Muslims, because you find yourself supporting them anyway, our new Muslims, and you just remember how you felt, and you don't want other people to feel like that and to go through that, because it's really lonely. Like, I'm a really gregarious person, and I would say that I've never not had friends, but in that time I think I felt the most alone.
Obviously, I think, you know, Amanda and I can relate as female, as women, as female converts. And I think, you know, I relate to Hanan's, what she just said about being lonely. The first year or so was very, very lonely for me in particular. I just wanted to know, I mean, I think we're gonna go into more depth about this in future topics anyway, in the future, episodes anyway, about the differences that maybe male and female converts experience. But I wanted to know how it was for you. I mean, like you said, you took your shahada in 2002, so a little bit before myself. How was the first year or so for you? What were your challenges?
It was really interesting, and when, you know, because looking back on it, you can actually see it in a completely different perspective as to when you're in it. Right. And it's actually trying to remember that feeling of, you know, was I alone in there? Was I feeling kind of isolated? And because I took my shahada, you know, in London, as it were, and then I came back home to Pontypridd. In Pontypridd in South Wales, there isn't a masjid. There's a prayer facility at the university, which everybody uses. And I found that the head of the student union, and he said, right, you've got to learn to pray. This is the first thing he said to me, and this is actually one of my do's, is like, he said, forget everything else at the moment, just learn to pray. So then I was, you know, confronted with this, but I had help from them. And then he said, this is another brother you should meet, and he was from Oman. So I had an Omani brother who was showing me what to do as well, and, you know, taking me around and talking to me and giving me all sorts of good advice. And then I was meeting people from other places, and it became apparent to me that they all had very different views. And that what I then had to try to do was to try and separate from Islam what was culture and what was religion. And I found it's like salt and sugar mixed in the same bowl. And this was my biggest struggle to start with, was what's actually a cultural practice and what is normative Islam. And having a variety of inputs from these people from different, you know, Islamic traditions didn't really help, because I had people from Pakistan telling me one thing, and I had people from Kuwait telling me something else.
But I think that, you know, women tend to be quite good at supporting each other. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're sort of very much like, oh, I phone you or keep in touch. And I don't know if the brothers do that so much for each other.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because after, you know, I've been doing it for a while. As soon as a student at the university took their shahada, they'd go and find me. You know, they would introduce me and they say, this is John, he took his shahada 20 years ago. If you've got anything that you want to know, you know, about Islam or anything like that, any questions, ask him. And generally they wouldn't have any questions, because a lot of people who come to Islam have already done some research. I mean, the last brother I remember, he'd already learned to pray, and he'd already learned Surah Al-Fatiha, and he'd already learned, you know, these very sort of basic things before he took his shahada, because they're making sure, I mean, alhamdulillah, the brothers that were supporting him were making him, they were saying to him, look, you realize what you're doing, you know what, you know, this is a big step.
That's good.
And, you know, and he already knew that. And so I the only advice that I could give him at the time was, you're going to get given a lot of advice. Just say thank you very much, and take it under advisement. Don't say, look, I don't want to know. Just treat everybody with good humor, as it were, you know, and say thank you very much for giving me advice. But
this comment segues very nicely into our topic for today, which is do's and don'ts for new Muslims. And I know, we've asked you both to sort of think about what you would advise to people who are very new to Islam. I think now would be a good time to ask you about that, whoever wants to go first.
Would you like to go first?
Yes, I've whittled it down a little bit. And I think also going on from last episode, if you don't know your seerah, if you don't know the history, the history of the Prophet ﷺ, and if you don't know the Prophet ﷺ, then you don't really know your religion. It's such a foundation. So I would say read/know the seerah. So when those cartoons, came out, the prophetic response would have been to say, that's not our prophet. We know it's not true. So therefore we just dismiss it. Because at the time, I'd always remember reading this and was that the Prophet, some people, they said his name. They said, instead of saying Muhammad, they said Hanan or something like that. And it meant something bad. So when the Prophet heard somebody calling him this, he just said, well, that's not me. I'm Muhammad. And just carried on, and I just thought that was just amazing. He didn't bite. The person obviously did it to insult him, and he knew that, and he knew it was an insult. And what was the point of going, reacting to somebody who's an idiot, basically? This is, and then look what's happened as a result of our, of some Muslims' reactions to that. I'm not saying that we say it's okay. Of course, it's not okay, but we don't act in that way. So that's one of my that's my first one. Should you do now?
Oh, me. Okay.
Do you want to swap back and forth? Okay,
because just following on with something that Hanan said about reading the Seerah, because that's the top of my list. My one was get a good English translation of the Quran and read it. Good English, because I started off with alhamdulillah, the Marmaduke Pickthall one, which was written in very archaic biblical language of thee, thy, though. I mean, because I'd only known that language from the Bible from back then. It as a sacred textbook, it actually, I could understand what, in that context. But then when I read later on the Abdul Halim, Abdul Halim, the Oxford translation, it was just a breath of fresh air, because all of a sudden it made a lot more sense. So, there are some really good ones that have been done as English translations. But the thing is that if you just learn the Arabic of the Quran without understanding it, without knowing what you're saying, you're kind of missing the point of learning the Quran,
because there won't be that connection, right, between you. You won't feel it, and when you're reciting.
So because I used to have the Yusuf Ali translation, and it had the Arabic and the English side by side, like on a page for page type of thing, and I still got it downstairs. It's well thumbed, and now I've gone on to, finally I made the leap into just an Arabic one, which I found really hard. But in that way, when you learn to read Arabic and you've got it side by side, it's actually really good. Because when you read one line, you can just skip over the page and you can see,
what you're saying. What it's saying.
That's very true.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I took the opportunity of doing it when I was commuting to work from Ponsonby to Cardiff. Every morning and every afternoon when I was coming back again, I would read just a little pocket-sized book, a Sahih International one, and I just used to read that on the train, and it would give me 30 minutes of reading it, sort of each one way and the other, or even having it now, because now you can have it on your phone. So you've got Quran apps on the phone, which is an English translation, but read it regularly. Is the thing about the English translation, because for us, not having Arabic as a first language, and because the actual study of Arabic is an ocean, as they describe the language, that and we're not scholars, but we need to understand it. And this is part of Islam, is our book and the Seerah. So as Hanan said, the Seerah is definitely one, but get an English translation of the Quran you can understand. But
it's interesting, because I think, I've had somebody that I was interviewing before, and in all honesty, and apologies to whoever it was, I can't remember who they were, but they were saying that they preferred the Pickthall version because of the language, and because they felt that it gave the Quran the dignity that such a holy text deserved. But then I was thinking, but when the Quran was revealed, it was revealed in the language of the day. It was revealed to those people in the language that they spoke. It wasn't some highfalutin Shakespearean version for them. It was their day-to-day language.
Yes.
The way it was described to me is this, that it was actually revealed in a very highfalutin Shakespearean thing, because that was the highest form of the Arabic language that ever existed. And it actually, the Quran actually serves as a benchmark for anybody who gets stuck on something in Arabic grammar. They actually refer to the Quran. So, I mean, even in a secular way, it's become that way. And that's it. I mean, the pinnacle of our English language, as they say, was Shakespeare. Yeah. That Shakespearean language, because the use of it, we've never excelled that. You know,
yes, I see. I understand what you're saying. Yes, it was, but the society was a society of people who spoke highfalutin Arabic. You know, so you can still argue it was still their daily language.
And it's interesting though, because you say about the pitfall one. What I was referring to was the pitfall one is written in a more literary style in that way, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and they say this is the thing about the Martin Ling's Sirah, is because he was a Shakespearean scholar.
Wow,
so he's written it in a way that it actually is written like that. So I think that's it, as Amanda's point there about the pitfall one being that way. I mean, it was the first Quran I had, and I thought it was amazing. I mean,
for me too.
But you could also say, that, you know, because I found the older translations harder to read in terms of, it's a bit flowery. I don't know if that's the best explanation, but it's a bit flowery, isn't it? You know, and I do prefer personally the modern translations. However, you know, I'm assuming, Pictor was a convert, wasn't he?
Yes.
Is he the one that was buried in Highgate?
Yes.
On a side note. Okay, yeah. So it's him. So, you know, you could also say that it could have been a form of dawah to maybe the people at his time.
Sure.
I mean,
definitely.
Random off the top of my head, because we're so used to having the Bible, as you said, John, written in the way it was.
Yeah,
I suppose you could see what he was trying to do with the translation of the Quran. So
which in that day and age makes sense. But today it doesn't.
But now, no.
Very few people actually read the Bible these days.
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Amanda, do you have anything that you'd like to recommend, or
what as do's and don'ts?
Do's and don'ts, yeah. What
I have so many, and to be honest,
we all have.
Yeah. I think my big thing, I mean, akin to what John was told by one of his early contacts, forget everything else and just learn to pray. But I would put with that, find a mentor. Come hell or high water, find yourself a mentor. Find one person who is going to be your point of contact, who you are going to learn how to pray from, who you are going to learn the basics from. Everybody's going to flood you with advice. Thank them kindly. Explain that you are taken care of. Explain that you have a mentor, and then go and clarify with your mentor if they've said something contradictory.
Alhamdulillah.
Because, you know, Islam is simple, but we try to complicate it as human beings. And yes, there are a myriad of opinions.
Yeah.
At the start, just stick to one way of doing things with your mentor. You can learn about the rest later.
Yeah.
You know, that would be my main bit of advice. Yeah. What about you, Aisha?
So when you do get given advice and when you do get given books, please do look into what you are given. But what I mean is, do check your references. And like Amanda said, if you can get a mentor, and that's a massive if, because there was no one I could have gone to, you know, you're kind of left on your own. And if you do find yourself in that situation of being left on your own, you know, what's your kind of, at your disposal, you have dua. Especially when you've taken your shahada, I believe that Allah, you know, he's definitely going to look out for you. And if you just ask, if you make dua to Allah, pray to Allah, basically is what I'm saying, supplicate to Allah for guidance, he will put people in your path. And he will help bring people to you, which will help navigate your way.
Okay, so we've had 4 do's. Hanan said, do learn the Sirah. John said, do find yourself a Quran translation that you can connect with. I said, do get a mentor. Aisha's is do. How do you simplify what you said, Aisha, into a sentence? Be selective about what you're given.
Yeah, but the next one I think is very important, which this is not in any order, like 1, 2, and 3, is to be kind, gentle with your family and friends. But because I think this especially, many of us look back and we weren't. So I regret, and I have apologized to my family for when I was sort of harsh and
zealous,
exactly, you know, enthusiastic, you know, and just thinking that I'm right, and it's really, really important. It's really, really important.
Yeah, it is.
Because it is such a, I mean, I can't, I can't imagine how I would feel if one of my kids, obviously I'd be devastated if they decided to not be Muslim. So therefore I have to think, even though we weren't in any particular Christian practice, it was still a massive change. I mean, how you dress, how you eat, everything you do then, how you bring up your kids, everything, you've changed everything, and they've got to adapt to that. And we might have taken years to decide, but they haven't had years. They haven't sometimes had 5 minutes warning.
They've had a drop on them.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, my sister was amazing. I said to my sister, I'd become Muslim. She went, oh yeah. That was it. But
Cool.
yeah, cool. Yeah, she like so chilled out, and alhamdulillah, she's Muslim now. But but your parents, it's a big thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say everything because that's in one of my don'ts. Or should I go over into a don't?
It was actually to add to what Hanan said. I put be nice to your non-Muslim family and friends.
Yeah.
You're now a better person than you were, but they're the same. If you see what I mean.
Yeah,
so
I get you.
If you actually want to show them the beauty of Islam and what it's done and what's good about it, is you should be a better person in front of them.
I know I went through that phase as well of being quite harsh. And I do regret it so much. And I think since then, I've sort of tried to, especially with my mum, because obviously I'm a girl. So, and my mum, having grown up through the 50s and 60s in feminism and all of that, she took it hard. And so what I've sort of tried to subtly subtly as sort of, hidden messaging to her, but tried to convey to her is that I didn't become Muslim despite how she raised me. It was actually the natural conclusion of how she raised me. My parents raised me with morals and ethics.
Yeah.
And so that was just sort of, the natural next step. And I think she's sort of starting to suss that out. Alhamdulillah. But it's
funny, my dad doesn't like the scarf, not my mum. And I find that sometimes that you'll have lots of people that I've spoken to who are converts, they'll have one person in their family who might be really vehemently opposed to it, and then another one is okay.
I mean, now, after being Muslim for this long, I mean, I came to Islam after September the 11th. But anybody who becomes Muslim nowadays, in my opinion, is, I think, alhamdulillah, how did they see the beauty of Islam?
Yeah.
I mean, there is a case for forgiving people for not accepting Islam because what's being portrayed to them, it's not Islam.
I think it comes more down to personal connections. If you know Muslim people, then you will know that that's not what they are. So what about don'ts? We've had some really good advice for things to do. How about things not to do?
Don't become the haram police.
Could you explain for those who may be very new and haven't yet encountered a haram police, could you explain what that is?
Well, when I became Muslim, and I then, you put on this pair of glasses where you view the world through these rose-tinted lenses of everything being amazing, and that certain, Muslim countries having the right idea about how to do things. So that if you see a brother who comes to prayer and his trouser cuffs are over his ankles, if you see somebody doing wudu differently to you, if you see somebody not wearing a hat when they're about to pray, you can go and correct them. And you have all these really good intentions of trying to set the world right without actually realizing that
woefully unqualified.
You are unqualified to do so, because what is halal and what is haram is actually written in the Quran, and it is very little that is haram.
But everything is halal unless it's prescribed to haram, and I think that's at the beginning we don't know that.
We don't know
because maybe we have people saying that to us,
and we're being told that you've got to stop doing this, stop doing this. So we can get over fervent, maybe,
But I think too, as converts, we are faced with haram police quite a lot because.
Yes.
I like to think that everybody has good intentions and wants to, help us on our journey and help us to purify our actions and so on and so forth. But the art of giving advice, the art of giving nasiha has been lost. And this is the issue, is that nobody knows that you don't tell the new Muslim to take off her fake nails and not wear mascara to make wudu in front of everybody in the masjid. And also, subhanAllah, if somebody's just taken shahada, and you want to advise them in order to prevent them from doing something really sinful, start with the big things.
Yeah.
Her nails and her eyebrows are not the issue. The issue may be that, she's heading down to the pub to meet her friends for a pint after this. These are the things that you might want to advise on. But even then, is it your place?
surely we have to have the understanding, because, you're going to come across people who are alcoholics. You're going to come across, all sorts of things. And people are going to slip, and you've got to help them back up, not kick them while they're down.
So this advice actually that John has said applies to both new Muslims and to others who are trying to help, quote unquote, new Muslims.
Yeah. I would like to talk about a don't is, if you're female in particular, please do not get married within the first 3 to 5 years of taking your Shahada.
I would add a caveat to that. I do totally agree with you, Aisha, except for in one situation, which is if you have come to Islam through a Muslim who you are romantically involved in. In that case, you want to make a decision. Do you continue this relationship as it is? Do you cut it off, or do you do the right thing and get married? And that's not necessarily a decision you want to make straight away, but you should think about it pretty soon after, because you don't want to be involved in somebody who is not terribly practicing while you are trying to implement Islam in your daily life. I'm not talking about people who become Muslim in order to be able to marry somebody because they're not Ahlul Kitab or something like that, or for brothers. I'm talking about people for whom that person has just been the catalyst.
What's the male equivalent to that?
I would say for the brothers as well.
Yeah.
Don't consider getting married until you know enough of the basics to be the head of a family.
Looking back in hindsight now, I can only speak for myself here. I thought I was doing the right thing. Everyone, you should get married, And I remember one brother, he asked me that question and he said to me, things will probably settle down for you when you get married. I think it's important that women in particular, we will be very sought after as converts, regardless of where you're from.
The brothers too.
Yes. That is
a number
true.
of. I'm sorry. I know I complain on social media a lot about the men messaging me about, can you find me a white wife? But I get messages asking if I know of any converts.
A white convert brother.
Not necessarily white, but just converts in general are sought after because they're seen as being free of cultural baggage.
Yes, it's really important, I think, to protect yourself as a female. And obviously I'm being very gender biased here. And, you need to understand the fiqh of divorce, what your rights are rather, the khula, the fasq, everything, you need to learn for your protection. And as Amanda said as well, having a firm foundation of your deen, getting to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's a reminder to myself anyway. These things are often put down the list of what we kind of should, if you like, do when we first take our Shahada. So we mentioned mentors. I think my assumption would be that it may be easier for a male convert to find a mentor. Again, I don't know if I'm correct. It isn't.
No.
Okay, Amanda's shaking her head and saying no, so I've been corrected. Okay, fine, that's fine.
Just because there aren't that many people with the experience to do it well.
But yeah, it wasn't easy. I mean, my story was literally a case of I had about 12 or however many witnesses take my Shahada with me, and they were all gone the next day. So, I had to learn how to pray myself. I had to do all of those things myself. So no one, and it's funny because one of those sisters actually didn't know her rights Islamically with regards to marriage and divorce. So you can understand, if some born Muslims don't, then what's to say you will? So you need to go out there and find appropriate teachers, or nowadays, I suppose, I'm not saying we should take our deen from YouTube, but if you get the basics and then go and find a proper teacher or go to a course, please go out there, learn your deen, find yourself, as they say, be comfortable in your own skin, comfortable within Islam, get used to everything, get used to your lifestyle change without rushing for a spouse, because there's plenty of time for that, inshallah ta'ala.
Hanan, what would you add to that? And John?
To the marriage one, or just to another don't? I just put that you shouldn't get married without a wali that and someone that you know a lot, that can find out a lot about your spouse. Because I use people who will stand in. Yeah, if possible, but maybe you shouldn't be going into marriage if you can't find out about your spouse. I mean, I've met people who have, somebody's want to get married and all they really want is that you've got a pulse. It's that simple. You're just alive. And if you're a convert, you have no family to support you, and they know you're vulnerable, so they will prey on us. And it does happen. The serial convert marriers, if that's the right word. And I knew somebody who got married and divorced within a week, sort of thing.
Whoa.
When I'd said to this person, like, why is he rushing? Why is he rushing? You don't know anything about this person.
Yeah.
I said, well, haste is from Shaitan. And they said, oh, she's from Shaitan. I wasn't trying to badmouth this person. I was just saying, hang on. It's a big decision. It is a big decision. And I think sometimes they think that it maybe doesn't matter so much for us, like this person had a child, so therefore she's already spoiled. I don't know, I mean, I don't know what they're thinking, but the way that they get away with treating us is not acceptable, and imams shouldn't be marrying them either.
I agree. That's another topic.
John, what would you add?
Just to say that also, don't feel like the pressure put upon you to find a spouse and be married is something that you should succumb to either. Yeah. Because not everybody is going to benefit from being married. As Amanda pointed out, it's a really good point. It's for the brothers, is that you're going to be taking on a family, or you could be taking on a family if you marry somebody who is divorced and has got kids. You're taking on somebody else's wife and kids in Islam. Yeah. So you're going to be responsible for the Islam of the children. There's so many responsibilities. Learn about your rights and responsibilities before you even consider doing it. And also, when you talk to the person who is the potential spouse, find out what you agree on. There can be cultural chasms, not differences of what's going to be expected of you from people's families even as well.
Yes.
If they're from a particular part of the Indian subcontinent, they're going to have very different expectations of you if they're from Jordan or Morocco or from America or... because it's a big thing you're doing, and also this, like, don't be in a hurry to do it as well. It's a really good thing to do, and it is highly commendable. And the Prophet said that it will cure a lot of the problems for the men, especially because of all of the distractions, without wanting to say too much, that there are in society nowadays. That it's a way of safeguarding it for men. For women, basically, they need to be protected from men, and it's and Islam is easy, but the thing with it is that it's very hard to do the easiest of things in Islam. The hardest things to do in Islam are the things that you shouldn't do. It's easy to do the things that you're allowed to do, but the things you shouldn't do, like fasting. Fasting is not eating, and it's really difficult to not eat, isn't it? And actually keeping yourself to yourself is a very hard thing to do as well. Keeping your opinions to yourself when you shouldn't speak. Speaking about things you've got no knowledge about.
There's a term that I've heard coined a few times, and I've used it myself, which is convertitis. The inflammation of the ego of the convert, basically. This syndrome that so many of us fall into, and I was guilty of it myself. May Allah forgive me.
I think we all have.
And I have to say that the community at large does not help with this because of the pedestal we get put on. You're better than us. You're more pure than us. Allah loves you more than us because He chose you. So what's your opinion on XYZ? And then I feel emboldened to be so audacious as to give a fatwa on it.
I did actually say to one brother who actually said this to me, I said, I actually have a lot of respect for people who are born Muslim that actually are able to stay Muslim, stay in Islam. In our journey to Islam, as it were, before we took our shahadas, we may have encountered Muslims in all kinds of places where we would go. You wouldn't expect to find them. And I mean, they will tell you they're Muslim. And it's like, well, is it your round then? And it was one thing I'd written down is that don't be surprised at how little some Muslims actually know. Don't take it for granted that just because they've been born Muslim that they know more than you. And as Amanda said then, they'll put you on a pedestal or they'll kick the stool from underneath you.
There's no middle ground. It's funny that.
Hanan, what were you saying?
Sorry, I was going to say, like, one of mine was don't take knowledge from everyone. You don't know actually what you're taking in. It's kind of like food. You want to read the ingredients of the packet.
And this is where having a mentor comes.
It does.
Really. It does. Because everybody will want to impart their wisdom on you. Yes, and they may not be that wise. And like John said, separating culture from Islam is like salt and sugar if they're mixed together. And, people who've been Muslim all their lives don't know the difference between their culture and Islam.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how are we supposed to figure it out?
Exactly.
But, find somebody who knows how to help new Muslims, either somebody who has been through it themselves or somebody who has experience with people who've been through what we've been through. And they can help you navigate this very, very bumpy road.
So Amanda, on that note, I want to ask you a question then. You're recommending looking for a mentor.
Yes.
Very quickly, briefly, as a side note, what should we look out for? What should new Muslims look out for? What, top things should they look out for within a mentor? What kind of qualities? Or similarly, you just said they should either have gone there themselves or be experienced around those who have taken Shahada. Or what else could you add to that? What kind of qualities should they be looking for?
I think that, obviously, New Beginnings, who this podcast has been supported by, they have a buddy program where they match people, somebody who has this experience and who has received training in mentoring as well with somebody who has taken the Shahada recently. In Cardiff, we're currently setting up such a program.
Yes.
And what we look for in that is people who have empathy, people who are not judgmental, people who have a good, solid understanding of Islam. I can't say free from cultural influences because we're human beings and we have culture.
Yeah.
But who are aware,
all of us,
but who are aware of the differences, and people who will be encouraging and understanding of the journeys that we go through. I think one thing, I had a very good teacher when I first became Muslim. She was a good teacher. She was not a good mentor. She taught me how to read Quran. She taught me how to pray. All of that was very important. But when it came to my struggles, she was dismissive because her attitude was, well, you're Muslim now. So, you can't do that. You can't, I would ask about what should I do with my family at Christmas time? And she would be like, but you're Muslim now. Astaghfirullah, we don't do Christmas. And there was no understanding that that's not a one size fits all answer for everybody.
Yeah.
So this understanding, this flexibility, and the ability to listen more than to talk. That is very important because sometimes some of the things we face, we can figure out on our own, but we just need a sounding board for them.
Hence the mentorship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So active listening, basically someone who can actively listen and not just always get that, not listen to respond necessarily.
And obviously somebody who is a practicing Muslim themselves, somebody who is praying 5 times a day, doing all of the fard things that we need to do as Muslims, and who is living their lives as best as they can, submitting to Allah. Of course, that's very important because they have to be setting an example.
Can I add another don't? I was going to say, don't go to extremes with your religion, because Islam is the middle path. Because you'll often find that with your overzealousness, because it's overzealousness, is that even a word? You will rush into something. And I think that's very true for me anyway, definitely, because the Aisha because obviously, even though we're this is audio, we're obviously seeing each other on Zoom right now. The Aisha that they see right now is not the Aisha they would have seen 10 years ago. Like, you wouldn't have been able to see me 10 years ago. My face was covered, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you choose that and you can sustain it, that's great. But again, make sure that the Islam that you're going into, whatever manhaj or whatever you follow, is obviously correct, first thing, but it's sustainable, because you will find that
burnout.
Again, it's not, you will have burnout, and you will throw yourself into the deep end of that pool of, and it's not sustainable. I personally didn't find it sustainable for me. Again, living in the West, you have to be flexible. And I think that's what we touched upon earlier. The deen is easy. You don't have to, you can change your mind. Scholars did change their mind or have a difference of opinion later on in life, and they have actually said that in some of their books as well, and that's okay, because we're human beings. If we're not growing, and if you're remaining stagnant, that's a problem. But again, like I said, make sure the lifestyle you choose, and especially for women in particular, and I suppose it does appeal, go for the brothers as well, but for women in particular, because we so visibly wear our Islam literally on us. We advertise our Islam on our heads and on our bodies, by what we wear. Make sure that the deen you are following is sustainable. So I think that's what I would say to new Muslims as well. Be mindful of the fact that you are going to be on a journey. Please do not go to extremes with your adopted kind of tradition, or whatever it is you want to call it, and that realize that there is room for flexibility, despite how other people behave. There is room for flexibility, and again, the Islam is the middle path, and this is the path that inshallah ta'ala we should try to follow.
John, what would you advise?
Don't lose your patience, and don't forget to be grateful. These are two things, patience and gratitude, are the highest things that Allah has given us. Absolutely. And if you're patient with people and you're grateful for what Allah has put in your way, you can't fail. And these are hard. This is probably the hardest thing to do, is remembering when to be patient and remembering when to be grateful. Because you need high doses of it. And patience, as they say, exercise patience. And think of the word exercise in the same way as you have to exercise any other muscle in your body, is that patience is something you have to exercise. So don't be quick to anger, and don't be quick to go to extremes in things. As Aisha said just then, really is. It's like, because it's so easy to just, to go completely the other way, to snap, as it were. And to also forget that when Allah's given you something, you should be grateful for it, because he can take it away.
Yeah, absolutely.
He'll replace it with something far worse. Yeah. And this is the same now that you've accepted Islam. Be grateful that Allah has allowed you to do this.
Yeah.
Just think about how much worse it could be if he takes it away from you, because we're in the end of days, and there's a hadith that says that you'll go to bed Muslim and wake up a non-believer, and you'll go to bed a non-believer and wake up as a Muslim. And one of the hikmahs in that is that you may have doubts when you go to sleep, and you wake up and those doubts are gone. Or you may have no doubt when you go to sleep, but something will happen in the morning that will make you doubt it. And there's nothing wrong with actually having this, in a what you could call a crisis of faith, because it means you're actually thinking about Islam seriously. You're taking it seriously. So be patient and have gratitude.
Like that. Brilliant, mashallah.
Hanan?
I can't really follow that. That's good. We'd have to do podcasts more often so we learn these things from each other. One of my number one, actually, the one I put down first, was don't change your name.
Yes.
Because I can't go back now, right? I'm still the other name, which I'm not going to say, to my family. It did really affect my family, other people calling me Hanan, and they didn't like it. And it was, I justified it in that, I was christened that name and I didn't have any choice and blah, blah, blah. But it didn't have a bad meaning. It's a bit dated now, because obviously it's a 60s kind of name. But I think, I changed my name, I changed what I ate, I changed how I dressed. I tried to, I almost completely changed my identity and my culture, which we said at the beginning. And then slowly over time now, I feel like I've come back to sort of, I've got a Cornish flag on my car, for instance. I'm not into flags, but the Cornish flag is it. And just embracing, and if you can maintain the essence of who you are, if you, except for obviously the haram things, that's who Allah made Muslim. I think that's what you have to remember, is that you were enough. That whole saying now is all like, I love me and all the rest of it. But but just that you Allah made you Muslim. It didn't mean that you had to completely change your everything about you.
Well, it's interesting, because if you really want to get technical, Sunnah is not to change your name when you convert. It's interesting, because when I used to work for a Muslim organization, and I answered the phone once to one of the local imams. And when he asked my name, and I told him, my name's Amanda, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I assumed you were Muslim." And I said, "I am Muslim." And I said, "Oh, why don't you have a Muslim name?" And I just went, "I do. I'm Muslim. My name is Amanda, ergo." He laughed and he said, "Subhanallah, you're right. Jazakallah.
Mashallah, tabarakallah." That's a good response.
Because what makes a name Muslim is that a Muslim person has it.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Calling me Brother John. Also, I had people translate my name to Yahya for me. There are still some brothers who call me Yahya, but that's because I've known them for a long time. They've always done that.
But I've noticed that people do feel that they have to call John brother, because it's almost like,
because I haven't got, I'm not an Ibrahim or an Abdullah.
I find the opposite. I rarely get called Sister Amanda. And I think that's because people find it it doesn't match. It's a mismatch.
Yeah.
The Amanda. It just sounds funny. Yeah, exactly. So
I think for me, because obviously I've adopted the name Aisha. The thing is, my name, I'm just going to say it, my birth name's Kaylee. Right. So, and it was a bit odd for me saying that, actually. It's really strange saying it. But the thing is, the meaning of Kaylee isn't great anyway. Like, it's an Irish sneeze up, isn't it? Let's be real. Kaylee, having a Kaylee.
Spelled differently, but
but the meaning, that's the meaning.
It is one,
regardless of how you spell it. I mean, I was actually named after a song in the 1985, but that's another whole kettle of fish, Marillion, which I've been told many times. But so I changed it. But it's funny because for years, I didn't feel comfortable being called Kaylee. And obviously my mum, sisters and everyone else calls me Kay. But sometimes when they'll introduce me to, say, the Muslims they go in a taxi with or whatever, they'll say, oh, her name's Aisha or whatever. But only now, over the past few months, and I mean literally the past few months, I'm okay with being called Kaylee again. Isn't that strange? I mean, I'm not suggesting I still will be Aisha. You know, Aisha is who I am. I haven't deed-polled my name. I haven't officially changed my name, and I'm not going to. But I am Aisha. And it's actually quite funny because it was a choice of between Aisha and Iman in university. And it was actually another Aisha who picked Aisha for me. But then they still ended up calling me Kaylee. It was hilarious. It was weird. But yeah, it's an interesting topic. But I actually do agree. I think it's lovely to see a range of kind of non-traditional Islamic names, shall we call them, out there now. You know, I've got a Reva friend who's Samantha, and you know, and it's funny actually when she rocks up to certain places, and when she goes to certain places, and that's what happened to me, because when I have medical appointments and stuff, obviously what's on my records is Kaylee. And I remember once, it was quite nice. I had to go for a blood test, and the name comes up on the board. There were loads of us sitting there waiting for your name to come up on the board, and then it just went beep, and then it had Kaylee Davis, and I stood up, and then you could hear the Muslims going, "Mashallah." Or the Muslims in the surgery said, "Mashallah." I'm like, yeah, hi. So you get that as well. That's a nice thing.
It's funny because I did change my name when I first converted because it was the done thing.
Yeah.
And
That was the 90s.
It was the 90s, and you changed your name because you needed to have an Islamic name. Islamic meaning
Sounding
Arabic.
name.
Any Arabic word would do, apparently. And so I picked one and promptly regretted it, and spent the next 16 years being called this name that I didn't feel was me, that I didn't identify with, that I didn't really like even the sound of. And then basically, as soon as I got divorced, I moved back to Cardiff. I shucked that name as quickly as I could because I thought, alhamdulillah, I'm getting a new start. I'm going to go back to my original name because I just thought this is what I need to do.
Good for you.
Ibrahim, Salman, and other things like that are not Arab names.
They're not Arabized names.
Abraham was not an Arab.
Yeah,
No.
the Arabized names.
They're Arabized. Musa, Isa is like, is Aramaic, probably from Palestine. So there are so many names that they consider to be, Arab names.
But not just that, if you look at, these heritage Muslim cultures, they will give their children non-Arabic names. I mean, I know girls named Palwasha, Nariman, Parveen, things like this. These are not Arabic names, and yet they're seen as acceptable Muslim names. So what's wrong with John and Amanda and Kaylee and whatever Hanan used to be?
On a side note, that sounded really weird. You just calling me Kaylee. Oh, it's really strange.
It's what you're used
really
to,
weird.
Isn't it? SubhanAllah.
Yeah, because any Aisha, my ears prick up and I automatically look around, So,
no, but it's about two.
I get what you mean. Yeah.
If somebody shouted Yahya and I was in his shop, it wouldn't be me that would turn around first of all.
Exactly.
Sometimes I call Hanan by her other name if I want to get her attention for some reason.
But the funny thing is my sister still calls me, okay, I'll say it.
No,
No, it's the great mystery. Leave it.
Yeah, Lisa still uses an abbreviation of your first name.
She does it in work, and so it really confuses obviously everybody in work. All the children, all my colleagues know me as Hanan, and I feel like Hanan. I do like that name.
Same.
I love the meaning of
it's like
it.
your business cards now.
Yes.
Oh yes. But it is like the same as you. It's my passport is the other one.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah.
It's interesting, isn't it?
And I still kept my surname, which when I was a child, I thought, well, I'm so getting rid of that one. But
clearly not now.
I kept my name, so I am still Sandercock. Is my surname.
Yeah. Sadly, guys, we have reached the end of another fantastic episode.
MashaAllah.
And Hanan and John, it has been an absolute wonderful experience sharing the mic with you both today. Jazakallah khairan to you both. And,
Very cool.
for imparting your wisdom.
Anything good that we've said is from Allah, and anything bad is from Shaitan. We ask your forgiveness for it.
Absolutely. Same with us.
Jazakallah khair, and keep up the good work. Your podcasts are awesome.
As Aisha said, Jazakallah khair to you both for coming on and for sharing your advice. I hope that our listeners will benefit from it. As always, we welcome all and any feedback and comments. please do subscribe to our podcast. It is available on our website, which is beginnings.org.uk/unplugged. And it's also available on all major podcast platforms. Inshallah, Aisha and I will see you next month, where we will be discussing male privilege amongst converts.
So for now, this is Aisha.
And this is Amanda.
And this has been Converts Unplugged.
Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.